Hello, Fallout content viewer. I'm going to divide this video into a few sections with timestamps in the description. That way, if you don't care about Creetosis at all and you just want to listen to me complain about Fallout New Vegas, you can skip to that relevant section. First, we got to do a quick recap and catch people up to speed. First time on The Old Knight Talks About Fallout, I made an off-the-cuff video and I claimed that Fallout fans are crazy. It isn't very organized or thorough, but the general idea is that Fallout fans complain too much about Bethesda, they praise Fallout New Vegas too much, a lot of them don't think for themselves, and I don't think you should obsess over media that you hate just because it's popular. In fact, my second video about Fallout I titled Fallout Fans Are Different, because while everyone complains about how the franchise they used to really like sucks ass now and it's all the fault of Jews and women, wait, what was I saying? Oh yeah, Fallout fans don't complain about the changing franchises in the same way. It's way more petty, cringe, whiny, and lame. And hopeless. We'll get back to that though. I like getting off track, but let's stay on topic. These Fallout videos started a relative shitstorm. Now, I've said some off the cuff things before, whether I've talked about Jewish power or women. Alright, well, last time, I swear, we'll be done talking about them. The point is, sometimes I do enjoy a bit of controversy, but this Fallout video was just meant to share my observations, my opinions, and while I might have spoke authoritatively about some things, I do have a pretty solid depth of knowledge about these things, and I expressed that I didn't find New Vegas to be as much of a masterpiece as H-Bomber Guy had promised me. I made the video in a single evening in just a couple hours, and then life moved on and I started playing Morrowind again. Fast forward to today, and Enclave Emily made a 53-minute hit piece about me, Creetosis talked about me for over 100 minutes, and I have over 1,000 comments on that video. Many of them are just repeating nonsensical gibberish. One common theme is that I'm too stupid to understand a hypothetical, or maybe that I really love playing bad games. Because, if you didn't find the writing in Fallout New Vegas to be life-changing, you clearly have an IQ below 70, you can't tie your shoes, and your diet consists of dog shit and gruel. Okay, seriously, I don't mind disagreeing with people. I don't even mind being insulted. This channel was built on the idea that I think the leveling system in the Elder Scrolls Oblivion is good, and this is famously a broken system. I argued that it's actually poor balance with the tuning and the enemy scaling system's a problem, but the attribute leveling system itself was awesome and it's great. I've argued that dozens of times. This wasn't the common consensus on the internet. It still isn't. So I've received quite a bit of pushback, which is fair enough. The response from Fallout fans has been very different. Creetosis and Emily did not engage with what I said. In fact, they went out of their way to avoid it. Often they would agree with the point I made, repeat my point in a different way, and then call me a retard for not agreeing with them. You don't need to take my word for it. We are going to go over some examples. I think something that's more interesting is demonstrating this as a pattern of behavior. First, I'm going to walk you through some examples of Creetosis misrepresenting other people. Then we'll talk about how he did the same thing to me. And we're going to start with Norte. Norte is a mainstream Fallout YouTuber. He makes a bunch of contents, shorts, and a little bit of longer form content. And a few years ago, he made one short in particular titled Fallout is Grounded, until it isn't. And in it, he talks about how Fallout as a setting is not always grounded, it's not always deadpan, and it's not always dark. And then he gives a few examples of when it's not this way in his opinion. Now, this is something I largely agree with, and if I took any umbrage with this short, it's that I think his short might have painted a picture that Fallout isn't as dark or brutal as it actually is. So we could nitpick it. For example, here he says,
A darker, deadpan, grounded Fallout game wouldn't be Fallout.
and well, that's not technically true. And if a new Fallout game was 5% darker, 3% more grounded, and 1% more deadpan, it would still be Fallout. But I think everyone absolutely understands exactly his point here. That Fallout is not always grounded, deadpan, and dark. And again, I think his overall point, if you look at the title, Fallout is grounded until it isn't, Fallout is not always grounded, is something the vast majority of Fallout fans would agree with. It's not grounded when Melchior in Fallout 2 throws a rat into some green goop with FEV and it comes out as a Deathclaw. And yeah, when you're actually playing the game, it just looks like the Deathclaw just runs out of nowhere, like from the outside of the map, but he's coming from the green goop, the FEV. So you could say he's summoning them, I guess. I don't know. It depends how you want to interpret it. He was a magician when he wasn't a super mutant, so he has magical powers to turn rats into Deathclaws that fight for him? Come on. It's not grounded when the shaman from Arroyo has psychic powers to speak to you through your dreams. Oh, that's your hometown. Of course, the shaman's there. As long as they speak really funny, then they can talk to you through their dreams. They get psychic powers.
Chosen, our crops fail, our reserves are meager. Return to us with the keg. Your failure is our last light.
Or maybe the psychic powers addled his mind and that's why he talks funny. Who knows? Fallout is filled to the brim with humor and emotion. So as for deadpan, I don't think anyone will call it deadpan. It's absolutely not at all. This is a large part of what makes it so popular. Even Creetosis, I think in his video response to me, called Fallout 20% unserious or 20% humor, something like that. I don't know, I wasn't really listening. But this isn't Diablo, it's not Lord of the Rings, it's not even something like Ender's Game, or any number of good books, games, media, doesn't matter. It has a lot more humor than a lot of these other stories. And some of those over-the-top caricatures and zany moments just adds to the quality of the game. Okay, so how did Creetosis respond to what Norte said? Well, he made a 2-hour video where he argued that Fallout is not entirely goofy, wacky, or unserious. Now, that isn't what Norte said, but that didn't stop Creetosis from playing clips from this short 3 times in his video as an example of someone who believes that Fallout is never serious. And even in the video, he explicitly says, yeah, and I'm talking about you, Norte.
But hopefully it should be more than clear by now that the people who claim Fallout was always extremely silly and goofy are misleading you. Yes, I'm talking about you, Norte, you disingenuous fuck.
Okay, hopefully that was really clear. Norte has a very short video. And in it, the title is that Fallout is grounded until it isn't. And the message is clearly that Fallout is not always grounded. It's not always dark. It's not always, you could change the word to serious if you want. Creetosis warps that into saying that Norte is claiming Fallout was always extremely silly and goofy. Was always extremely silly and goofy.
That the people who claim Fallout was always extremely silly and goofy,
and then calls him a disingenuous fuck. Wow, incredible. Maybe earlier in the video he did a good job of representing his point. Let's listen.
The setting for the Fallout franchise is quite absurd, and it's always been this way. A darker, deadpan, grounded Fallout game wouldn't be Fallout.
the claim that Fallout has never been serious is such an absurd and egregious lie that anyone found repeating it should be laughed out of the room.
I need you to understand as well that that clip was not from Norte's video and then Creetosis' video. That's just a streak from Creetosis' video. Now, I cut out a part in between where Creetosis just insulted Norte, but it's to show you when you put them right next to each other, you can hear Norte's words, and then immediately after, Creetosis says the claim that Fallout has never been serious. It's like a game of telephone. It starts as him saying it isn't always grounded, and then by the end of the video, never been serious has warped into extremely silly and goofy. Always extremely silly and goofy. Like, you can't just slowly change what somebody says until you get to something that's completely different and pretend they said that. And, you know, some of the comments are going to mention, oh, well, this thing you talked about is just an Easter egg. You know, random encounters are not Easter eggs. That's why I talked about Diablo 1, where the final boss in the game says, eat your vegetables and brush your teeth after every meal, except he says it backwards so you can't actually tell when you're playing the game because it's hidden. That's an Easter egg. The skulls in Halo, those were Easter eggs in the older games. Random encounters when you are traveling and you meet up with like a Monty Python scene or a skit, that's not an Easter egg, that's just part of the game. And you can say, well, it's not canon, but it's in the video game. The vast majority of people are not looking up what is and is not canon. They're playing the game, they're experiencing the game. And, you know, speaking of canon, did you know that these are not canon? These canons are not canon. You know, that's something we need to talk about, Bethesda. This is a problem I have. We'll get to that later. Sorry, I keep going off track. Let's focus. I think you get the point. He just lied about what Norte thinks. He lied about what Norte said because, well, I don't know. The next person he treated like shit, Emil Pagliarulo. So there's a good chance you hate Emil Pagliarulo. Hopefully you're a normal person and you just criticize him and don't like his work, but, you know, maybe you hate his guts. So Creetosis decided to go over a speech given by Emil point by point and misrepresent him. And when I say misrepresent, I mean specifically lie about what he said. If you pretend that someone said something they didn't, you are lying. If you frequently lie about people, no one should trust what you have to say. Ever. To show you all the ways he misrepresented Emil, this would be a 30-minute section. That's about how long it took Never Knows Best to go over it, so I'm going to pick 2. Emil Pagliarulo, lead writer of Fallout 4, he gave an infamous speech. He was clearly very nervous, and he's not a talented public speaker. You can see that from the speech. He gave 3 basic ideas about writing for writing in video games. The first one is pick a few strong central themes, and he called it keep it simple, stupid. Creetosis at one point tries to talk about, well, you need to have complex writing in your RPGs, because he wants you to think when Emil says kiss, keep it simple, stupid, that he's talking about writing in general and not just picking a few strong central themes.
Keep it simple, stupid. What does that mean? Well, for me, that means when I'm coming up with a story for a game, I like to concentrate on strong central themes. And 1 or 2 strong central themes is enough.
Let's talk a bit more about the phrase keep it simple, stupid, though. This is a pretty good phrase. I like it, as it applies to, well, just about everything. Except fucking story writing. In the creation of fiction, The more complex and detailed the world, events, and characters are, the better.
Emil also says draw from your personal experiences. He says write what you know is what he calls it, and he tells you that you should draw from your personal experiences. And the last one is great games are played, not made, and he really just means keep the player experience in mind. You aren't writing a book. Video games are an interactive medium. Take that into account when you're writing. Now, I will complain that Emil doesn't always follow this advice. In fact, there's a lot of examples where he doesn't, but that's a talk for another day. Just because there's a lot of valid criticisms about Emil doesn't mean we should lie about him. That's wrong. That's not a good thing to do, and it should be called out. So Emil Pegliabrulo says you should draw from your personal experiences. That's the one we're going to go over point by point. Now, I strongly agree with this concept. Some of the best works in fiction are from writers who pull from the big events in their life. Tolkien is the best example. He fought in World War I. He was fighting in the trenches, which gave him a perspective on humanity that most of us will never have. You've probably even heard that Samwise Gamgee is based on loyal and courageous soldiers. He referred to these people as far braver than himself, and that's what he made that character from. Now, during this section of Emil's speech, he talks about writing the Dark Brotherhood in Oblivion. It's an assassin's guild, and he said that he used some inspiration from growing up Catholic. He doesn't go over every parallel and example, but if you're Catholic and you played Oblivion, you can probably fill in the blanks. Sure, Sithis is an equivalent to God, the Night Mother is a play on Mary, and Emil explains these 2 points, but the process to summon the Dark Brotherhood, to call upon an assassin to make a bargain, it's called the Black Sacrament. If you didn't know, there are 7 sacraments according to the Catholic Church, things like baptism and communion. There are 5 tenets in the Dark Brotherhood. This is not too different from the 10 Commandments. There's a hierarchy where you have a listener who's kind of at the top of the hierarchy. He's not a deity, he's not a god, he's just a mortal, but he can listen. This was clearly inspired by the Pope and the hierarchy of the Vatican. The Pope can listen in a way that we can't. Now, if you dive into more esoteric lore, you probably know that the Night Mother sacrificed her 5 children to Sithis. Now, if you didn't know this, in the Catholic faith, God sacrificed his son Jesus. Now, that was a voluntary sacrifice, and it's supposed to be the perfect sacrifice. Now, these 5 children are supposed to be the children of Sithis and the Night Mother, just like God and the Virgin Mary.
But we as an audience still don't really know what this means, because anyone can go and look at a religion and be inspired or base their story on parts of that religion, whether it's one they're directly connected to or not. He just says Sithis and the Night Mother are the dark versions of God and the Virgin Mary. Also, if the Night Mother is the Virgin Mary, then who's the Dark Brotherhood's version of Jesus?
It's almost like growing up Catholic gave him a lot of ideas, and simply by reading about Catholicism, you don't quite get the same level of knowledge, understanding, or connectivity. Growing up Catholic allowed him to very easily put all those things together. It's a bit shocking that Creetosis needed this explained to him. That little section was just for Creetosis. He was really concerned that Emil didn't tell him all these details. Don't worry, I got you, boo. Now, sorry for that tangent, but Emil explains this whole process in his speech, and it's just to summarize how you can draw from personal experiences to make something new, even something that you've never done before. So he's never run an assassin's guild, but he can draw upon what he knows in the real world as a human being and make a story from that by connecting them.
Write what you know, for me, means that you draw upon your personal experiences.
Just like Tolkien wasn't in medieval Europe, he's never seen an elf or a dwarf, probably, but he could draw from his personal experiences in World War I to make, well, a masterpiece. Something that I would say is actually a masterpiece. So how does Creetosis respond to Emil's idea here? This second point.
He concludes that write what you know simply means draw from your personal experience. This is also a point I very much disagree with. You can write good stories without direct first-hand knowledge or personal experience. You can be inspired by someone else's experience they're told to you, or that you hear of to write great things.
Oh, well, maybe I missed a part in the speech where Emil said you can't write a great story without having a first-hand experience. Let's listen.
What does this mean, write what you know? Does this mean that if you are working as a dishwasher and decide to become a game developer, you need to make a game about washing dishes? No. Write what you know. What do I know about being a medieval or fantasy assassin? Not a lot, right?
So in the 2 examples he gives, being a dishwasher or writing for an assassin's guild, he explicitly states that you do not need first-hand experience to write a good story. So Creetosis hears him explain that and says this is a point I strongly disagree with. There is no way for a viewer to interpret that in any other way than that Creetosis is saying that Emil believes it is impossible to write a good story without first-hand experience, even though he says the exact opposite twice. Like, I get you might not like Emil. You're disappointed with Fallout 4. You shouldn't have had any hopes for Starfield, but maybe for some reason you did. And so you want to believe everything negative about this guy. That doesn't mean it's right to lie about him. This is such a bold-faced, direct lie. There's no way around this. And even when called out for this, he pretended to misunderstand when Never Knows Best called him out for it. I'm not going to go into that again. If you want the details of that, I talk about that in my YouTuber tier list, which might be part of why Creetosis doesn't really like me, but that's why I wanted to talk about other people here. This isn't really about Creetosis and I. I want to make sure you can see what kind of lying scumbag this freak is. However, now both Enclave Emily and Creetosis have lied about me as well. I've already made a response to Enclave Emily, but I want a quick show that Emily does the same thing as Creetosis, misrepresents people, and then argues against that straw man. So Emily played a clip from my video, but cut me off right before I said the words, Fallout 1 was a smashing success.
Fallout 1, back in the day, this amount of sales, 600,000, was a smashing success. It was huge, it was great, it was awesome, and people loved it. That's why Fallout 2 came out.
I really just need to take over and actually explain this as someone who can do basic mathematics. I may not be a math teacher, but I can actually interpret numbers, so let's do exactly that. And in case you couldn't tell, I hate math teachers. Anyway, put the spreadsheet back on screen now for me. Thank you. Let's look at Fallout 1 first. Fallout 1 came out in 1997, back when most people did not even have a PC, much less a PC to play video games on. The Steam platform didn't exist, and it was made on a budget of, after adjusted for inflation, about $5 million today.
Fallout 1 was a success, although not a bombastic one until after a while.
So I sped that way up and cut out a huge portion. The point is, they hear me say Fallout 1 is a success. Then they call me a retard and an idiot who doesn't know what I'm talking about, talk for like 5 minutes, and then in their conclusion just repeat what I said. This absolutely gives viewers that I believe the opposite of what I said. And because there's so many insults and random bullshit strewn in between, you don't see that happened. It's very easy to miss that. So I just sped up and cut out the bullshit. I say Fallout 1's a success, they call me a retard, and then they say that Fallout 1 is actually a success. It's misleading, it's stupid, it's what they do. This pattern of misrepresentation continues with Creetosis' video about me. So I say in my video, the kings in Fallout New Vegas are Elvis impersonators, and the fact that they are Elvis impersonators is a joke. In fact, I explicitly say they are a serious faction, and that I don't like the juxtaposition. The juxtaposition of a serious faction with Elvis impersonators is meant to be humorous. Here.
As you keep going, you find a gang of Elvis impersonators, and people act like this isn't a joke because the game itself takes the faction seriously. That in and of itself is a joke. The juxtaposition of it is absurd.
For the few of you who don't understand this, I believe the writers invented a school of impersonation. This is not a real thing, by the way. It's something they made up, and because a large portion of Elvis impersonators are panhandlers, it doesn't even make sense for this school to exist. There's a reason it's not there in real life. There's nothing like that. A school, like a building, a physical building where people, you pay people and they teach you to impersonate Elvis? That's just kind of absurd. There are museums to Elvis, but not in Las Vegas. Maybe a leader then would dress and look like Elvis if he thought this guy was worshipped because he found a museum, but it wouldn't really make sense for the whole faction to be like him. And think about it for a minute. If Fallout 4 had a faction called the Great Bambinos and a leader who called himself the Great Bambino, and they all wore baseball uniforms, they carried baseball bats, and they attempted to imitate Babe Ruth and acted like him, would you seriously accept some explanation about a museum or a school that doesn't actually exist in Boston as how this would come to be? It doesn't matter if the game treated them like a normal faction with quests about making Boston a better place, or they're really trying to communicate or negotiate somehow with the Institute or something like that. They're still the Great Bambinos, which in and of itself would be a joke. That doesn't mean the entire faction can't be taken seriously, but I wouldn't like that, personally. Okay, back to New Vegas. I say that I don't like that they're Elvis impersonators. So what does Creetosis say? The game itself takes the faction seriously. That in and of itself is a joke.
Again, it really seems like this person has a very narrow set of expectations, and anytime something even slightly strays outside of that set of expectations, it is automatically silly and stupid and a joke and not to be taken seriously at all. This is a person incapable of seeing something out of the ordinary and taking it seriously, or reading it as having sincerity or anything other than a joke, regardless of how that thing is treated.
What? I can't take anything seriously? In my video, I talked about not liking that they are Elvis impersonators, and I believe that that simple fact of that faction is a joke. I did not treat them as nothing more than a joke. The Elvis impersonator portion is a joke. I did the opposite of what he said. Now, again, it's possible for someone to disagree with me. Creetosis really likes the faction. But if he took my opinion at face value and actually engaged with what I said, You would have to say, I think a school of impersonation is entirely believable. It makes sense that a group of tribals would then find it 200 years in the future and be preserved. I mean, it was because of Mr. House, and then begin to worship this person and try to emulate him. Now, I disagree with that. I don't think that is grounded. I don't think it makes sense at all. And I think the only reason it happened is because there are Elvis impersonators right now in Las Vegas. If you walk the strip, you might see someone who's a panhandler who has a bucket in front of them and they want you to throw some cash in because they're doing a funny impersonation. Now, there are some people who do this professionally, but it's not that many and it's a hobby. I don't buy it. And maybe I'm wrong about this. Maybe there's things I don't know, but I'm just not buying it. It took me out of the game. This would be just like if a game invented a school of impersonation for Eminem because, he was really popular and kids copied his style. And you had a gang of people with short, bleach blonde hair and a wife beater on, and they called themselves the Slim Shadys. Of course, the leader would be the real Slim Shady, and this is a game set over 200 years in the future. If that's believable to you, great. But instead of even having that conversation, Creetosis ignores what I said and claims that I can't take anything seriously, or that I treated them as nothing more than a joke. I can't take them seriously at all. Like, that's just not what I said. And maybe he's emotional with me. I've insulted him and I've talked about him in the past. And so I think his response to me is, well, it's filled with emotion and vitriol. Fair enough. I think when he gets emotional, he loses his ability to understand words and sentences. So maybe his interpretation is just an accident. That's why I talked about Norte first, or Emil Pagliarulo. I don't think he's emotional with them. This is his pattern of behavior. All right, I got one more example. Is Fallout serious? Well, the level of seriousness of the Fallout franchise, when I'm talking about it, I say it's partly a dark comedy. It's kind of zany. And, somebody corrected me and said, well, it's more of a caricature. And I think I agree with that. But when I first talked about it, here's what I said. Fallout is partly a dark comedy. That Fallout has always been partly a dark comedy, which is obvious. This doesn't mean that I think the game is just a series of jokes with never a serious moment. Yeah, I would call it it is partly, that word is meaning, a dark comedy. But it is partly a dark comedy. It's not a lie to say that there is silliness in Fallout. I never said it was a comedy. It is partly a dark comedy. Partly. That word has fucking meaning. So those are all clips between the two videos that I've talked about Fallout. Creetosis, in his response to me, played clips from both of those videos. 2 are from the first video, 4 are from the second. Now, it's pretty obvious from that I think that Fallout is primarily not a comedy. That as a player, you're meant to take the game seriously. You're trying to immerse yourself in the world. But I also believe there is a lot of humor. It's not comparable to something like Lord of the Rings, or Diablo, or even something like StarCraft, which actually has a solid amount of humor. There are still easily 10 times more jokes in Fallout. And when I say jokes, I'm including pop culture references, pretty much anything that you would consider wacky or zany. Let's see how Creetosis interprets me.
Are you really that shallow as a person? You seem like the kind of person to dismissively scoff at anything that is even slightly outside of your expectations.
Oh, sorry. That's how he responded when I said I didn't like the Kings being Elvis impersonators. In this example, he actually found a clip of me misspeaking. I say that the game is partly serious instead of partly a comedy. Oh, he's got a gotcha. What does he do with it?
Is not fully serious, that it's only partly serious, that there is tons of humor and a lot of jokes and pop culture references totally thrown in and intermixed within the game.
Once again, wording is important. Listen to what he said there. Only partly serious. Partly serious implies that a lesser part of the games are serious. I would not describe some 80% as partly. When I say something as partly something, I'd be referring to like 30% or less. Google says the definition is to some extent, not completely.
It's over. He got me. He caught me saying something incorrect. In my video that I admitted being unscripted, quickly made, and just getting my thoughts out there, I misspoke and called it partly serious. I said it's not fully serious, it's only partly serious. You can interpret that how you want, but if you listen to me 6 different times, say something that you would interpret in the opposite way, like maybe, just maybe, it was a slip of the tongue. He even Googled what the definition of partly is for us. Now, I'm glad that the 36,000 people who watched this video got the full context of what I believe. These people clearly don't think that the one time I misspoke in an off-the-cuff video represents what I think. Thanks, Creetosis. What a great guy. I could just play myself speaking from the video Creetosis is responding to respond to this point. I could clarify again and again that I think that Fallout is primarily serious. But just like he misrepresented Norte by claiming that Norte is thinking that Fallout is always wacky, goofy, and silly, he's just doing the same thing to me. Unlike Norte, I did misspeak once. I absolutely stand by what I said. There is a ton of humor in Fallout. There's a lot of jokes. There's a lot of pop culture references. Sometimes it's in your face, like where it's a Monty Python skit with a random encounter, and other times it's more subtle, where like the dumb guy calls the cows moo-moos, or Mr. Fantastic says his famous line about a theoretical degree in physics.
They asked me if I knew anything about power plants. I said as much as anyone I had ever met. They asked me how well I understood theoretical physics. I said I had a theoretical degree in physics. They said, welcome aboard.
So I'm going to move past this point because there's not really much else to say. My point is just that Creetosis is not talking in good faith ever. It's not just with me, it's with anyone. It's just not something he does. I didn't watch his Many a True Nerd video because I'm not going to watch that boring crap, but I can only assume that he also lied about him and just strawmanned him repeatedly because this is a pattern of behavior, and he's just simply someone that should not be trusted. Now it's time to talk about Fallout New Vegas. My original Fallout video was all over the place. There are some points that I want to clarify because, well, I've been misrepresented and maybe, some of that's my fault. In my video, I talked about expecting gray morality from Fallout New Vegas because, well, H-Bomber Guy has a 20-minute section in his Fallout New Vegas is a Masterpiece video, and during that he describes a quest with some interesting moral choices. He also says, this happens on a constant basis.
This is more than a chance to be good or bad and see what happens. It's an opportunity to figure out how you would really act in a situation like this. And questions like this are happening on a constant basis here.
I admit I trusted that too much, and I expected moral questions to come up more than a handful of times based on this absurdly popular video. I haven't seen any pushback to it, and I think saying things like these are happening on a constant basis, well, it's just a massive exaggeration. Murdering everyone in Goodsprings for essentially no reason is not a real moral question. Sure, you can lie to Boone and have him shoot his old friend because it makes you laugh. You could kill all the ghouls instead of helping them, but most of them are not really gray or deep moral questions. It's do the wrong thing or do the right thing. Now, there are some great quests in New Vegas, but the majority of them give you a pretty black and white option. So this is why I brought it up in my first video that I was surprised by the lack of gray morality. Like there's some in there, but I really expected quite a bit more thanks to H-Bomber Guy. Now this is an old video, but I do want to show how this has been a continuous trend from 10 years ago up until now about how people treat New Vegas with kid gloves. Just a few days ago, as I'm recording this, Shades of Slay made a New Vegas video, and he's talking about how you have so many different choices in New Vegas and how that makes it special. Now this is true. He's correct objectively that you have a ton of choices in New Vegas, but he just gets some things wrong to make New Vegas look better than it is.
On a first playthrough, you might not even realise the option to side with the powder gangers even exists at all. The game doesn't force you to pick a side in a heavy-handed way, it just places Joe Cobb there as an alternative if you happen to talk to him. If you never do, you'll simply experience the defend the town scenario and feel good about it. But the potential for another choice was always there. New Vegas is giving you a nudge and telling you, hey, you don't have to be the hero if you don't want to be. You can be the villain, or you can skip the whole conflict entirely. You're free to just walk out of Goodsprings and ignore both Ringo and Cobb. In fact, if you leave town without resolving things, the quest remains unfinished and in stasis. The conflict is paused in a stalemate without your involvement. That's yet another path. Inaction is a choice too.
So the first thing he said isn't true. On your first playthrough, you're told to go talk to Trudy. You go talk to her, and right when you meet her, she's arguing with Joe Cobb. If you talk to him, the second option from the top is, hey, do you want to help me take over this town? Now, you could argue that the game doesn't force you to talk to him, sure, but at that point, you're practically avoiding it. Read the screen. What say I help you take over this town? The way Shades of Slay is talking about this is that it's like some almost hidden path that a new player would easily miss. You'd only miss it if you're just choosing to ignore one of the main characters. Even more absurd, he behaves that the NPCs pausing and waiting for the player rather than acting independently of the player is a good thing.
The conflict is paused in a stalemate without your involvement. That's yet another path. Inaction is a choice too.
Like, how is the game remaining in stasis when you leave realistic or immersive? He says, oh, that's another path. Inaction is a choice, and the whole game will freeze until you come back. Joe Cobb won't attack until you mount a defense or decide to join him. And look, I really hate nitpicking things like this, but I've never heard someone talk this way for any other video game in existence. Would someone seriously make the claim that the game pauses and waits for you? That the game revolves around the player and your actions? That's a good thing? That's an example of player choice? Now, look, I don't like nitpicking people's videos like this because I'm not Creetosis. This is a weird thing to do. But I want to highlight people really like New Vegas, so they even classify its flaws as strengths and then really exaggerate the things it does well, while some others might nitpick every little detail about Fallout 3 or 4. Hey, one of those fans that does that is Creetosis, so let's jump back to him for a little bit. In his video about me, he pretended to have never heard of invisible walls. Here, let's listen.
What invisible walls are you talking about? Are you trying to get out of bounds? Because if so, yeah, no shit, there's invisible walls.
This is how he responded to me bringing up invisible walls in Fallout New Vegas. Now, he is not just a normal player. If you've done one playthrough and never ran into an invisible wall, whatever. But Creetosis is a content creator, specifically around Fallout. He talks about it for hours and hours and hours. At a different point in the video, he says that he's played this game across 3 different PCs, yet he's never seen an invisible wall. He doesn't know what I'm talking about. Every single mountain or small obstacle that looks like you should be able to walk through is blocked by an invisible wall. When Josh Sawyer was talking about things he wished he had done differently in Fallout New Vegas, this is the lead developer, he said that he would loosen up a bit on real-world map accuracy and insist that the world builders use as few invisible walls as possible, only to prevent them from falling and getting stuck. If a casual player had said this, I'd find it understandable, but a content creator around Fallout, I think this is just a lie in order to deflect and minimize one of the flaws of New Vegas. By the way, in the footage I'm showing, I'm always holding forward and trying to jump. So there's not just invisible walls in front of you, there's also invisible walls over your head so you can't even jump. You're just squished into like some invisible corner, basically. This has all been footage of me, but if you Google it, there's plenty of posts on Reddit. Other people can show you footage. There are plenty of invisible walls, and no, it's not just trying to leave the border of the game. That's ridiculous. Anytime you try to take a shortcut, you obviously have run into one of these invisible walls. Now, invisible walls don't make New Vegas a bad game, and if you like it, obviously these would not make you dislike the game, but these weird deflections are not normal, especially from someone so nitpicky and hypercritical as Creetosis. It just comes across as absurd. This is not a normal level of hypocrisy. If you hold something like Fallout 3 or Fallout 4 to this insane standard that no game could ever reach, why are you holding Fallout New Vegas to such a low standard where you pretend that there's no invisible walls? Or the crashes. Let's see how he responds to me bringing up that Fallout New Vegas sometimes crashes.
New Vegas crashing constantly is cited as a problem by Bethesda fans, and I'm at the point of feeling this problem is way overblown.
Sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to let everyone know that him bringing up this point that it's overblown was in response to me simply mentioning that New Vegas crashes.
Now, it is a game made in Bethesda's engine. It is going to have crashes. That's just the nature of the beast. Morrowind crashes. Oblivion crashes. Fallout 3, Skyrim, Fallout 4, Fallout 76, and Starfield all crash.
Just to make sure everyone's following along the context, people like H-Bomber Guy, who had said that Fallout 3 was garbage, or other people who talk about how absolute ass Bethesda games are, partially because of how much they crash, also said that Fallout New Vegas is a masterpiece. He's going to keep talking about Bethesda fans. I'm not really a Bethesda fan. I never bought Starfield. I don't watch the Fallout TV show. I didn't really play Fallout 76 past the beginning of it with a friend. And Skyrim is my least favorite Elder Scrolls game after Arena. It would go Oblivion, Morrowind, Daggerfall, Skyrim for me. Obviously, I'm someone who doesn't like the direction it's going. And simply, Bethesda games crashing doesn't suddenly make New Vegas a better game, for whatever reason.
By someone who has played a lot of New Vegas, completely unmodded mind you, my crashes were few and far between, and this is across 3 or 4 different computers over the years. I don't know why New Vegas is singled out as being a problem in this regard, besides the fact that Bethesda fans are likely looking for an easy win, and the game did notoriously crash a lot on launch, and this is a frequently repeated criticism. That was 15 years ago now. Let it go.
I love the irony of hearing Creetosis say the words, "let it go." We'll talk about that at the conclusion of this video. So first, Fallout New Vegas is not singled out for anything. People talk about Bethesda games crashing all the time. And I played New Vegas for the first time last year. I don't know or care about something that happened with it 15 years ago. And Creetosis, this might be a concept a little bit beyond your comprehension. But not everyone has the exact same experience as you. You could go to Steam reviews and read any of the negative reviews. There are some from this week, from last week, from Christmas. None of them say 2010. People are complaining about the experience they had with the game because it is crashing. The problem is worse than Fallout 3. It is worse than Oblivion, which is awful, by the way, and it's worse than Skyrim. For a game that came out in 2010, late 2010, it's beyond unacceptable for how bad it is. So, Creetosis, the fact that you didn't experience something doesn't mean it's not a valid criticism. And the only reason I could even imagine you talking about this is because you have some weird personal, emotional investment in this that you want New Vegas to be perceived as better than it actually is, which I don't get. This weird behavior, well, again, we'll tie it all together in my conclusion. And I think this goes beyond the game itself. It creeps into development. Stephanie Sterling, Enclave Emily, and others call the development of Fallout New Vegas a miracle. No other game development gets described that way by anyone. Maybe someone would say it's impressive, but Fallout fans can't help but exaggerate. I had a bit of a back and forth with Enclave Emily about this, but Fallout New Vegas has a total of 43,000 non-voice line assets. Of these, 18,000 of them were copy and pasted from Fallout 3, same file name, file size, file path. Does that mean the devs were lazy or the game is bad? No. But it does mean that UI, which is out of date, I think it was out of date in 2008, it's still awful and even more out of date in 2010. Fallout 3 having a bad UI does not excuse Fallout New Vegas from having a bad UI. Now, they didn't have a ton of development time, so it's buggy. So the UI wasn't improved. There's a bunch of copied assets. Fine. But I'm not going to pretend that all of that combined doesn't matter. Each of those points matters. They're an important part of my experience with the game, and they're an important part of my view of the development of the game. The best way to sum up discussion around Fallout New Vegas is it's treated with kid gloves. People freak out if it is criticized. We have people calling it literally a miracle. Even Synthetic Man, an anti-woke YouTuber who criticizes games for having women, having black characters, or pushing left-wing propaganda, well, he treats New Vegas with kid gloves as well. This is arguably the most woke Fallout, and I think it's by far, the optimal perk choice at the beginning of the game is one that makes your character gay. It even changes your dialogue options. You become a homosexual. That's what confirmed bachelor means. The authoritarian faction, they portray fascism, not like Mussolini, not quite like Rome. It's ludicrously hypocritical and evil. They aren't just a brutal far-right authoritarian faction. They kidnap pregnant women. They burn innocent people alive. They enslave everybody and their children. And they don't even have families. No one has families. They don't just torture and crucify their enemies. They torture and crucify their allies. And the cherry on top is the sexism. So they treat women worse than pretty much any society ever, which is impressive because society is pretty good at treating women poorly. But Rome treated women better. I think fascist Italy and Rome are probably the two main inspirations for the Legion, and both of them treated women way better than the Legion. They also had a large focus on family. Family was important in both these societies. But you get this Reddit concept of fascism, and you can just see the male feminist excited at this, to highlight the hypocrisy of the Legion. They won't let women fight in their army, even though in the game, women are just as strong as men. And I don't mean like the gameplay mechanics, the stats. I mean literally in the game, women are as strong as men. At the fort, in the arena, they have slaves fight each other, and it's a woman who's the strongest combatant, because in this, women are just as strong as men. It's the most Reddit concept ever. I don't know another way to put it. It's very, very Reddit to have, haha, look at those chuds get owned by a woman. They don't even let women fight, but women are actually just as strong as men. It felt like we took Mussolini, Rome, and then The Handmaid's Tale. Someone as connected to reality as the author of The Handmaid's Tale wrote the Legion for Fallout New Vegas. And, that was kind of a side rant. Whatever. Doomers like Synth, they're going to like factions that are brutal. And the world is very dark. Every choice you make is bad. Basically, everyone's going to die. Everything's going to turn to shit. That's just what Fallout is. Nothing can ever go well. Nothing can ever be successful. So maybe a black pill person just really likes that aspect of it. Instead of talking about other people, talk about New Vegas, I kind of want to give my thoughts, but in a little more coherent way than I had in my other video. First, I think New Vegas really does an amazing job at giving player choice. After reflecting a bit more why that didn't really, tickle my jimmies, is that the problems in the game world felt too easy to solve, and even worse, getting past them didn't feel rewarding. So it's not like increasing the difficulty would help. For example, if you play a woman and you choose the Black Widow perk, you can convince Benny to come up to his suite at the tops with you. From a roleplay perspective, this is kind of cool, but it doesn't personally feel rewarding to me. A quest line gets shorter, or a very easy quest gets a little easier. And it's impressive in a sense that the developers and designers made that. They deserve props. But as a gamer playing the game, it's like, okay, so I just skipped one portion of this quest. Like, it's not actually that cool. And I had to have sex with Benny. Maybe I got to have sex with Chandler. I don't know. Depends how you think about it. But I can see people who want to play the game over and over again, and they want to try out all the different options. They'd really find this appealing. But I think a game needs some choice, because, I don't want every playthrough to be the same, but the absolute staggering amount of choices given to you in New Vegas, it's way overkill for my taste, and it seems like they were going for quantity of choices over really the quality of them. That's kind of what I was getting at with H-Bomber guys saying that you're constantly giving these interesting moral choices, but it's usually like kill this person or don't kill them, help the boomers or don't help the boomers, do this quest or tell them fuck off. Like, oh, okay. Then when you look at it in terms of gameplay choices, you have 2 armor slots. What the hell is that? And damage threshold, wow. So it reduces the damage you take by a set number. Think StarCraft armor, or maybe damage reduction in Diablo. The problem is that in a first-person shooter action game, this causes fast-shooting guns to plummet in value. They already had the problem of burning through more ammo, but now, relatively, they do less damage than slow, high-damage guns due to this armor system. So it's not like the balance of the guns, it's the armor system. As you go through the game and start to fight difficult enemies, you just can't use, like, machine guns, basically. You have to use a slow-shooting gun. Unless you want the game to be just unnecessarily way more difficult and have spongy enemies. In particular, anytime you fight something with high damage threshold. So a spray and pray weapon, it's practically off the table. It just, that armor system doesn't make the game feel better, and it just kind of limits some gameplay choices from feeling good. Okay, but honestly, this is now turning into a nitpick 10-hour crap fest. I really don't intend to do that, but I do feel that I need to justify some of my opinions with this level of detail. Normally, I would never do that. I'm not like Creetosis. I don't think that's important. But I got to admit, the incredibly positive reception to Creetosis after he called me a retard like 200 times for not explaining all my thoughts in great detail, it got to me a little bit. It's a bit disheartening to see that over 30,000 people heard lies about me. Now, reflecting on my video, I would say I spoke more authoritatively than maybe I should have. I misspoke once. I didn't go into detail explaining my opinions. I just stated them and moved on. And I made a gay joke about Creetosis. I don't think any of those things make me a retard, and I don't think any of them are a big deal. I fleshed out some of my opinions, but honestly, if you want to know why I don't like the name Sunny Smiles for a tutorial character, you could ask me. I talked about that for 1 second in my video, and I get 10 minutes of you making up reasons for me and insulting me. What the hell is that? As for the gay joke,
so does Creetosis, and I'm pretty sure those two have sex with each other.
This really strikes me as some touch-starved, porn-addicted behavior. It reminds me of Tumblerinas and Twitter freaks, who see 2 real people who are friends, and immediately start shipping them. It is genuinely demented behavior, and I think this guy might have some actual mental issues.
What can I say, Creetosis? I have a great gaydar, and you kind of sound like you have a she-dick up your ass, so I was just making some assumptions. My bad. Lastly, it was an off-the-cuff, unscripted video. Creetosis knew this, he talked about it. It certainly was not meant to attract much attention. I say stupid things sometimes, and I'm never going to stop. But I'm not a liar. I'll never intentionally strawman someone, or misrepresent them, or pretend they're saying A when they're actually saying B. Creetosis and I are nothing alike, and thank God for that. I don't really think Fallout fans are crazy for defending a game that they love and criticizing games in the series that they don't like. I do think they are crazy because it is really excessive, like way beyond any other game franchise I've ever seen. Like, what other franchise are the majority of players called tourists? Oh, you've only been a fan for 10 years? You're a tourist. I don't think I've ever heard that about Warcraft or Elder Scrolls or Halo or anything. I think only Fallout is tourist a term. And it's especially ridiculous because it's meant to describe people who have only liked the game for like 17 years or something. You haven't liked it since the 90s. Now, this is two-sided a little bit. There are Bethesda fans or Fallout TV show fans who are really annoying and whiny, and they do antagonize Fallout New Vegas fans. I've even heard both Enclave Emily and Creetosis talk about Bethesda fans being really nasty to them a long time in the past. However, I have a feeling if they were the same people they are now in terms of behavior, they first were complete insufferable cunts, and then Bethesda fans responded to them in kind. Obviously, I've been nasty to both of these people, but it's been completely retaliatory. My first video wasn't rude, I was just fucking around. I can say with some confidence, too, that many of these Fallout fans started to like Fallout because of Fallout 3, and then went back and played Fallout 1 and 2 and fell in love. And they still have the gall to call it artistic rape. Not just that, the worst case of it they've ever seen. Not the Halo TV show, not the Warcraft movie, not every other video game adaptation, not what's happened to Assassin's Creed or Dragon Age or anything Fallout. Fallout's had the worst one. Not Lord of the Rings, not Dungeons and Dragons, not every other franchise that's been treated 1,000 times worse than Fallout. Not Diablo, not mages in wheelchairs from Warcraft. It's just such an obnoxious exaggeration. You don't like the direction the game franchise went? Get over it. It's been like 20 years, man. Maybe this doesn't belong in my conclusion, but we can zoom in on an example. Warcraft. It started as a real-time strategy game. In the 90s, it was brutal and savage. The theme was strength, brutality, and cunning. That's the path to victory. Total destruction of your enemies is the only way to win. By Warcraft 3, it had shifted to the redemption of the orcs through Grom Hellscream and Thrall, the fall of a holy paladin into madness and evil. It's my favorite game of all time, and I love how hard it leans into the importance of friendship. Thrall never gives up on Grom. Arthas falls to evil right after he betrays his friend Muradin. Cairn is portrayed as one of the most moral characters. He's wise, he's loyal, and just like Cicero in On Friendship, he connects duty and wisdom to friendship. Cairn Bloodhoof is the epitome of both duty and wisdom, and his main role in the story is Thrall's friend. He's a supporting character. It's a very real human concept that we all have related to, and we've understood it as human beings for thousands of years. Fast forward to today, and you can't buy Warcraft 3, the original game, anymore. It was remastered, which removed voice lines, it removed features, and it simply replaced it. Warcraft will never again be a real-time strategy game. It's been over 20 years. They're not going to make a new one. The Warcraft movie was nostalgia bait, and it retconned old established lore, even if it had some fun member berries. Now in World of Warcraft, you have these badass chicks like Sylvanas and Jaina. Thrall is simply a lame hippie instead of a war chief. Cairn is dead. The son of the badass human king, he's suffering from PTSD and trauma, and that's what the story's about now. The last time I played, the characters entered the afterlife to retcon more old characters that had died. In particular, they retconned everything from Warcraft 3, pretending it was orchestrated by this new villain, the Jailer. Not only that, when Classic WoW released, in 2019, this is a 2004 version of the game, people were given the option to play a game from 2004 or the modern game, and millions of people chose to play the old game because they believed it's so much better that even if they're playing content they've already done before, it's the same old content. That's what they wanted to do. Yet, Warcraft fans responded to this in a normal way. They stopped playing the games, they stopped paying for the games, they complained about things, and ultimately moved on. This is how an adult reacts to their franchise changing to be for a different audience. And honestly, it's the best way to influence a company. If enough people agree with you, eventually the company will have a financial incentive to change. If they don't, that means not enough people agree with you, and you will lose no matter how much you complain on YouTube, no matter how convincing you are, no matter how nasty you are, or how much you strawman other people. You could be as vitriolic as you want. It will never change anything. So that's what I noticed and what I talked about. Fallout fans behave differently. Instead of disconnecting from a franchise that they no longer enjoy, maybe they even actively hate it, they watch every new episode of the show with eager anticipation, excited to complain about a product that they hate. The only reason I can think that they do this is because other people really like it. It's not like they'd talk about an unpopular show that no one likes. No one would care to listen to that. And I don't blame all of the content creators. This is what Fallout fans are asking for.
Like I said last time, I'm not going to review this episode by episode. I will only make one more review covering the rest of the season because it was torture having to watch episode 2 and 3 twice. By popular demand, I'm back to review episodes 4 and 5 of season 2 of the Fallout TV show.
It makes sense that Synthetic Man doesn't want to watch Fallout. He doesn't like it, but that is what his channel is about. People want to hear him complain about it, and that's part of why these videos are popular. But I think I'm going to leave it at this. Creetosis is a bitch. He's a liar and fake. People also like to downplay things that are bad in games they like and overplay things that are good in games they like. They also like to really highlight the flaws in games they don't like and ignore anything good in the games they don't like. The Legion could have been an awesome depiction of fascist Italy with a Mussolini-like figure and some serious nationalism, but instead we got a Reddit portrayal of fascism. And I think that's all I got. All right, thanks for watching. Oh, if you want to talk to me, you could leave a comment. You could be a normal person and say, I think this was stupid that you said. I say lots of stupid things. I learn by talking. We all say stupid things sometimes. I don't think Creetosis will make a 2-hour video about you, which is good. So feel free to say some dumb things in my comments. All right, thanks for watching.
Get it right, get it right. Here we go now. Here we go now. Get it tight.